Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jane McAlevey. Her new book, A Collective Bargain, Unions, Organizing, and the Fight for Democracy. Also on the program today, joining us for a little bit in the first half, but later in the fun half, Nomiki Konst will be here. But before then, McConnell's plan to snuff impeachment voted on today. And Trump's got a non-defense. Abuse of power is not abuse of power to offer. Meanwhile, the Republicans will go to the mat to keep John Bolton from testifying. Meanwhile, new poll, 51% want him removed from office. And more importantly, for our purposes, ladies and gentlemen, 69% want witnesses. That's a vote a lot of Republicans are going to have to make. Meanwhile, violence thwarted before the Virginia pro-gun rally on MLK Day. Bernie is up in a new poll in New Hampshire. Meanwhile, apologizes to Biden, but not for talking about Biden's desire to cut Social Security. And Puma is back in style, ladies and gentlemen, as Hillary Clinton pushes her new docudrama. Supreme Court of the United States refuses to hear the Obamacare lawsuit until after the election. However, they will consider limits on free contraceptive care. Meanwhile, the National Archives attempted to airbrush anti-Trump sentiment from pictures of the 2017 Women's March. New Jersey votes to guarantee severance in wake of mass layoffs for workers. And lastly, Glenn Greenwald charged with a journalism crime, essentially, in Brazil. All this and more on today's program. Folks, we got a lot of stuff to get to today. A lot of, but first off, let me just give you this phone number. If you're listening live, you should be dialing when we go to the break. 202-224-3121. This is the Senate switchboard. You will be able to talk to your senators. Most important, if you are in Maine, in Arizona, in Colorado, in Utah, in Alaska, North Carolina, throw that in, Georgia. Also, Lamar Alexander apparently open to voting. The idea is you want them to vote for witnesses. We'll talk more about Mitch McConnell's. I mean, this is a sort of a stunning document, the resolution they're going to be voting on in just about an hour, which creates the rules for this trial. And it is, this is full on, Mickey Mouse show type of stuff that they're trying here. So make sure you use that number. I will give it to you in a moment. Also, Nomiki Konst is here with us.
Hi.
Hi. Nomiki's going to join us mostly in the fun half, but you have an announcement to make in a minute.
Yes, I do.
But before
also
we get
fun.
there, it's also going to be a fun announcement. We're going to get to that. And I want to also tell you, I just got somebody tweeted at me saying something. I'm paraphrasing because I can't find it right now. Hooray! The AM Quickie was available before I started my commute this morning. And that's right. AM Quickie, I can attest to it. So I'm getting up early to record it. It is in your inbox by 8 a.m. now. We have achieved whatever mission control launch. I have no idea what the metaphor is, but it is there now early for you. You can go to amquickie.com to sign up. It's all free, but we want you to subscribe, folks. It gives you the day's headlines and a little bit more in just 5 minutes every morning. And you get to hear my morning voice at least 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what the situation is with me and the kids. All right. So Alan Dershowitz is going to be one of Donald Trump's attorneys defending him in the impeachment proceedings. He is pretending like he's not an attorney for Donald Trump. He is also pretending that he's not advocating for his client. He's just done an assessment of the Constitution. And that assessment of the Constitution is that you cannot impeach someone for simply an abuse of power if they're president. You just can't do it. You need a crime now, or you need some type of law breaking. He's ignoring the fact that the Government Accountability Office has said that it was illegal for Trump to withhold, to freeze that money in the way in which he did. Now, to be fair, that's just a civil violation. It's not a criminal one. So he's not committing necessarily what we would call a crime. He's doing something that's unlawful. With that said, there were no laws. There was no criminal code when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution. So it's impossible for them to have been contemplating a crime in the way that it is defined. There is no such thing as a technical crime. We have laws. We have criminal laws. You either broke the law or you did not. There's no technical crime. When people say you got off because of a technicality, that is basically saying that the procedure in which you were arrested and charged with the crime was incorrect, was poorly, the process was off, and that's why you get away. But there is no, you don't get snagged because of a technicality in the law. You're not technically supposed to kill somebody. All right, here is Alan Dershowitz. Now, the sad thing for Alan Dershowitz is that in addition to, the allegations against him with Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, we don't know. In addition to the fact that he has perfect sex, according to him, he also loves to make love to the camera. And so there's voluminous video record of this guy saying stuff about impeachment the last time around. And now people are raising that to him. Here he is on CNN with Anderson Cooper and Jeffrey Toobin.
So let's just not talk about hypothetical. I want to go back. Previously, you said it doesn't have to be a crime if the person in office completely corrupts the office of president and who abuses trust and poses a great danger to our liberty. That is impeachable. Now you're saying criminal-like. So you're not. So corrupting the office of the president. Is that in your criminal light or criminal-like?
No, no, it's not.
So
and that was rejected. That was rejected by the framers.
So you were wrong. You're saying you were wrong back then.
I was saying that I'm much more correct right now, having done all the research, because that's the issue. Let me explain. Please don't shut me off. You have 2 against 1 here. Let me make my point.
No, I'm not on anyone's side. I'm trying to understand rationally what you're saying.
I did not. Well, listen, maybe you'll understand if you listen.
God.
I didn't do research back then. I relied on what professors said because... Please let me finish. Because that issue was not presented in the Clinton impeachment. Everybody knew that he was charged with a crime. The issue is whether it was a hard crime. Now the issue is whether a crime or criminal-like behavior is required. I've done all the research.
Okay, so you didn't do the research
22 years
back then.
ago.
Got it.
I didn't do the research back then because that wasn't an issue. I've done the research now. I wasn't wrong. I am just far more correct now than I was then. I said you didn't need a technical crime back then. I still don't think you need a technical crime. And I think your viewers are entitled to hear my argument without 2 bullies jumping on everything I say and trying to pinpoint and nitpick on what I said. Let's talk about what the issues are.
Oh, God.
Let me just say this before we talk about this. The idea that everybody's mad at him at Martha's Vineyard is horribly upsetting to me, and I'm just reminded every time I'm going to use this. I'm more correct now. I was not wrong then. I was just more correct now.
It's like a more sophisticated Trump, like it's his lingo, but more sophisticated, like through a legal lens.
It's the exact same. I refuse to admit that I was wrong, even if it helps me now in my, like, I was mistaken. I just was I'm more correct now. I was so correct then. I was the most correct. I thought I was the most correct. And then I turned it up to 11. And I found out that I could go get more correct.
You know what's so frustrating about this? Just as a side note, CNN props him up.
Yeah.
I remember in 2017, let's remember he's defending Trump right now, or officially or not unofficially, whatever. He's defending Trump. But in 2017, in February, when Keith Ellison was running against Tom Perez, they used Alan Dershowitz as their surrogate on CNN to trump up charges of anti-Semitism in the final hours against Keith Ellison. And they used that as a weapon. They sent out emails to all the DNC members on behalf of Alan Dershowitz. And Alan Dershowitz claimed, if Keith Ellison gets elected, I am leaving the Democratic Party. And Keith Ellison was not elected. And here he is, effectively...
He has been a cretin for decades.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned. But you're right. And I can tell you this, that people my parents' age are just sort of like, I can't believe what's going on with Alan Dershowitz. and this is part of the problem. Frankly, it's unrelated, but it's the same dynamic. This is why you do not promote never Trumpers who are Republicans just simply because they agree with you on the fact that Donald Trump is a horrible human being, which is not to say that you shouldn't make transpartisan alliances at times and et cetera, but there should be a value. There should be a give and a get. There is no value to the constituency for Rick Wilson or Steve Schmidt or David Frum.
Ari Fleischer's my new fave.
Well, but Ari Fleischer, is he a never Trumper? Or I don't think he's quite a never Trumper. But I'm saying people have come out and there is no constituency for these people. They are delivering no one to the Democratic Party in any meaningful way. They're not going to provide enough votes in the areas that we need it to make any difference whatsoever. But what you're doing is you're communicating to people who aren't as savvy about the news as you might be, that these people are to be trusted. Yes. And so when they show up and they say, yes, we should attack Iran, or when they show up and they say, yes, we should cut Social Security, people are like, well, this is someone I've trusted. All of the mavens that I look to determine whether this is a legitimate news story or that's a legitimate messenger have told me that they're a legitimate messenger, so I'm going to assume that their message is correct. And that's the problem. And that's what you're talking about there too. The Democratic Party has trained the Democratic Party to believe that Alan Dershowitz knows what he's talking about because it was useful for them to use him to smear Keith Ellison with anti-Semitism. And
meanwhile, this man, after Epstein, before this, they continued to put him on air. It's mind-blowing. Even Jeffrey Toobin had his own sex scandal a few years ago in which he, was a Me Too situation with an intern. These are the types of people that they continuously put on air, values, whatever things that they throw at us for not appearing on air. Oh, you had this thing, or you did that thing, or you said something ill of Hillary Clinton. They ignore all values when it comes to propping up the establishment. And it's not like he's, his ratings, maybe he's getting, strong ratings, but it's not like these people are telegenic and make the best arguments. At the end of the day, they're just reinforcing a bullshit narrative.
Yep. What's this?
I kept my underwear on during the massage. I don't like massages particularly.
Just so he can be on the record there.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make that clear. He kept his underwear during the massage. I actually am not a big fan of massages.
What?
But that's why I keep all of my clothes on and I don't get with them.
And haven't been linked to Jeffrey Epstein.
And I have no links to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I couldn't. I love these little Dershowitz clips.
What's going on with this?
Am I on mute? Yeah, there you go. As much as I love Dershowitz making a fool of himself, I couldn't stop thinking about why he's broadcasting from Miami and what he's doing there. Just the connections and everything.
All right. Well, let's move on to some good news. Now, Nomiki, past couple of months or so, you've been on the show. We get some great feedback. And I know a lot of people have been saying to you, you should get your own show.
I know. It's been crazy. I actually am listening to the people.
What?
I know. I read the comments, guys.
So Nomiki has an announcement, ladies and gentlemen.
I have an announcement. Starting this weekend, we will be launching the Nomiki Show. And hopefully the goal out of the show...
Now, have I been mispronouncing your name forever?
Yeah.
Like,
my mom said to me, she goes, well, maybe people will finally pronounce your name right because you'll have to say it every single day.
I don't even know if I can say it. I don't even know.
No.
Yeah.
Me-ki.
Well, how have I been saying it?
Nomiki.
I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong word.
Everybody does it.
Nomiki.
And
Did I just say it right?
Name. Yeah, Nomiki. Accent on the last syllable.
All right, that's easy. Nomiki.
Nomiki.
Right.
When I was in
accent on the key. Okay.
When I was in kindergarten, my dad printed a shirt. True story. And it was a shirt to teach my classmates and really my teachers who could read how to say my name. And he said, it's an oxytone. That's what accent on the last syllable is.
Oh, well, of course. All kids know that.
Right. Or teachers or, teachers.
Did the T-shirt really say
it really
it's
did.
an oxytone?
You could interview my father. I don't know where it is. I'm sure it's somewhere in my parents' house. The size.
Were you his first child?
Yes.
Okay.
Only child.
That's okay. That's why he didn't get the fact that no one's going to know what an oxytone is.
That's my father for you.
All right. So wait, details.
Yeah. So I am launching the show called The Nomiki Show, and we will be doing every week. We will be releasing a show and special segments and interviews. The goal is it's a deeper dive on a lot of issues that are not explored in the mainstream media or maybe don't get explored in as much depth on the daily shows. Also, my goal in the show is to break down how really the centrists are going at us. What is their infrastructure like? What is it? What is the Center for American Progress? How does the DNC function? Why does it matter in this primary? What could possibly happen in Iowa or Nevada in those caucuses? And let's play this out, because I remember in 2016, we were learning as we went. I was going through documents trying to learn about the superdelegate process and the history of the Hunt Commission and how they were formed. Well, the goal is I will be exploring a lot of these issues because I think they're going to be relevant in this very, tense primary season. But, we also want to talk about messaging and how, they push propaganda and the best ways to message back. So it's a little bit of deeper dives into, important issues, interviews. I have some really exciting interviews coming up. In the next couple of weeks, we've just locked them down. You will not want to miss them. One of them in particular is like a life dream of mine. So you definitely want to subscribe on Patreon. We're going to be posting it up on YouTube as well. All the spots that you do, I'm learning as I go. This is a new thing to me.
Right. All right. Well, and so what's it's patreon.com/
The Nomiki Show.
And so people can go sign up for it now. And they also, presumably, can get it as a podcast as well.
Yes. So it's going to be on YouTube a few days later in the full format with the visual. And then you can subscribe on Patreon and listen to it as a podcast on Stitcher, all the places, anywhere, iTunes, all the places you go, you can listen to it in full length. But if you subscribe, you might get access to special interviews and segments.
Okay. So head over to patreon.com, sign up, subscribe to the podcast as well. You will join us in the fun half. And also, hopefully, you'll be back. We'll try and get you in here on some Tuesdays on a regular basis.
Can I just say thank you? Because, we've talked about this for several months, and I'm very excited that, you believe in this idea.
She's going to be shooting it here, folks.
I am.
In this studio.
Yes.
That's and I don't know if people can see on the background, but we're upgrading the backdrop a little bit too. Way do we get lockers in here?
I know. I walked in and was like, oh, there's a whole new wall.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited. I can't wait to hear the first episode. And I've always thought that your insights about this process. I mean, we're going to talk, we left it off last week on the fun half where you and I were about to, you were about to school me on on whether the primary was rigged against Bernie last run through, but also just in terms of the mechanics of this stuff, I really don't know that people have an opportunity to talk to someone who both has such an in-depth understanding of the mechanics, also your politics, and is also willing to talk about it in public.
That's right. I think, and I'm going to be seeking out other folks who are willing to talk about it.
There's not a lot. Because people don't want to. That's right. Like, they have too much invested in the, going forward. Or, and that's one of the things I've always appreciated about you, which is why, I wanted you to win in that special election.
They did not want that to happen.
They did not, because you're willing to light some things on fire. But you also do so, I think it's very measured and sound, frankly.
Thank you.
And that's what I
thought so.
I did too. Well, they have a different agenda.
God forbid you go through records, guys, as Bernie is experiencing right now.
Exactly. We will talk about Bernie's apology and all that and more, because I know you have an idea about the strategy behind that as well. We will talk about that in the fun half. In the meantime, just a reminder, you can support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you do, you get extra content. You get the stuff commercial free. And but in the meantime, I should tell you about this. We've talked about this in the past. Embark. Do you have a dog?
I do, but my mom stole him from me. And then we lost ours last week, the other one.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear about this. Well, you'll be interested in this.
That was Debbie Downer. Rest in peace, Spoochie.
Well, have you ever heard of Embark?
No.
It's a breed and health test. It's DNA testing for your dog. And when I first heard of this, I was like, really? Why would you do that? We did an advertisement for it one time. Both Kelly, who producer emeritus on the program, did it, but we also got an email from a listener where it really hit home. I mean, this is Kelly's experience. She wrote to me, she received Edie's results. Edie is her dog, from Embark. There's so much information about her. She tested clear for all 171 genetic health conditions they screened for. So they screened for 170 some odd genetic health conditions. I don't know what your dog passed away from. Sometimes it's just old age, but a lot of dogs get cancer, this and that. And knowing ahead of time gives you a sense of how you can feed them and care for them and what to look out for. According to Kelly, Edie is not a carrier risk for any of the genetic diseases they test for. There's also a full clinical trait report. So great news. Most importantly, I can provide the report to her vet, which will provide information to help with Edie's health as she grows up. Also, some people want to know, like, part border collie, part whatever kind of mutt you have.
Do they show the family tree too? Like,
I don't think they actually name.
It's not like 23andMe.
No, I don't know if they do that. I don't think so. Some dog in Ohio who was just sort of walking by, met your mom somewhere. But we got another email from a listener in the UK, and the dog that they had was for his brother. And his brother had, some challenges in terms of like socializing and whatnot. And the dog has been a huge, like, having that best friend gave the kid more confidence and whatnot, and over the years. And the idea that they were doing everything they could to keep this dog healthy, and also, in terms of like knowing about the dog was a huge boon for them. And apparently Embark DNA, a dog test, it's the most comprehensive one on the market. It looks, like I said, over 170 different genetic breed or genetic health conditions, and it assesses amongst over 250 different breeds. It's the only research grade dog DNA test on the market. Their scientists took a look at 200,000 genetic markers and can make scientific discoveries that help dogs to have longer, healthier lives. They're accurate down to a 5% breed component. They have stellar customer service. They have vets and veterinary geneticists on staff to talk through your results. Right now, Embark has an exclusive offer you can't get anywhere else. Go to embarkvet.com now. Use the promo code MAJORITY to save 15% off your dog DNA test. That's Embark, E-M-B-A-R-K, Embark, vet.com. Use the promo code MAJORITY to save. All right, quick break. We'll be right back with Jane McAlevey.
Thanks.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back Jane McAlevey, organizer, author, scholar, currently a senior policy fellow at the University of California at Berkeley's Labor Center, part of the Institute for Labor and Employment Relations. And she has a new book out, A Collective Bargain, Unions, Organizing, and the Fight for Democracy. Jane McAlevey, welcome back to the program.
It is always a pleasure to be here. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Jane. Now, the last time time is completely flattened for me at this point. But you were here a couple of times in 2018. I think the last time you were here, we were talking about what is known as the Red State Rebellion. This was a half a dozen or so labor actions, strikes, if you will, by teachers across, I guess the Midwest and a little bit in the South. And since then, why don't you tell me, where are we relative to 2018 and what was 2019 like in terms of labor actions?
Yeah, we don't have the total numbers yet, but I think we're dare I say, we're trending in a good direction, because we can't say that about a whole lot of categories of the news today.
Right,
so,
that's true.
One of the things that's keeping me hopeful, quite frankly, is that the number of strikes is continuing. Now, it's not, so let's get back to the conversation we were having just to remind folks. So I did come on the last time, I think, to talk about the explosion of the strike that began in 2018 in West Virginia, where 34,000 teachers, school bus drivers, cooks, cleaners, the whole nine yards, walked off the job, shut the state down, and occupied the Capitol in a strike that for many came out of nowhere, though that certainly wasn't the case for the folks who were planning that strike in West Virginia. But and as you say, it began to spread. So there's several things that are happening at once. One is, we now know that in 2018, the largest number of workers in this country went on strike in over 30 years, which, when we get to how do we get out of the mess that we're in, day one of the Senate version of the completely skewed impeachment trial, how we get past the crisis of the democracy that we're having right now, I think one of the ways that we get past it and through it and out of it, quite frankly, is by using the same tools that trade unions and workers use when they're preparing for and coming out of massive strikes. So we can come back to that. But so the fact that 2019 continued, and what happened in 2019 is that the strikes moved into what we would call the blue states, in addition to that they stayed in some of the red states. But several things happened in 2019. We had huge, massive strikes in the state of California, from Los Angeles to Oakland and points in between. And we had private sector strikes, which is super important when we think about how do we affect the economy? How do we get corporations to, these guys are over in Davos allegedly talking about climate as if they're concerned. How do we actually stop and reverse rampant income inequality? The key to it's going to be a key is going to be a reinvigorated trade union movement and the ability of workers in this country to say, we're not coming to work anymore until you guys start sharing the pie. So that's the most exciting dynamic I think happening in the country is workers deciding once again in this country, no one's going to save them except themselves, and they're going to have to start taking pretty serious action to dent the current news cycle and to force policymakers to the table to share the wealth.
I want to talk about what the how that happens in terms of it being ordered, but I want to turn a little bit to the book. I mean, you had mentioned there was strikes going on, and you write about a couple of those, and I'll get to that in a second. But let's just start with this. You tackle some sort of the common myths of unions. What are those myths?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that chapter of the book was the one that I was least interested in writing, and I think my very smart editor, Emma Janaski, insisted on it over and over. Why? Because she's a 27 and now 28-year-old young millennial editor who said, you don't understand. We don't even know what they do anymore, Jane, right? So a part of the point of the book is this book, which is very different than the previous ones, is to reach an audience that actually doesn't understand unions or what unions do or what we have the capacity to do. So that chapter of the book, I try and take on a set of common assumptions or a set of myths. Unions are sexist, unions are racist, unions are corrupt, unions are fuddy-duddy, unions are old school, unions are irrelevant to today's economy. And I basically just take a whack at every single argument in there because none of it's true, right? The truth is, where you see the 20,000 person walkout at Google from last year moving is towards a lot of conversation in the high-tech sector right now about how are we going to have collective action? How are we going to try and force the Silicon Valley, the new power elite of the United States? How are we going to force the sort of high-tech sector, which, by the way, is the 5 largest, most wealthiest corporations in the world, are all the high-tech sector right now, right, globally. So, I just try and take a whack at each one of them. Look, is there sexism in unions? Absolutely. Is there racism in unions? Absolutely. What are unions? They are a reflection of the society in which we live. Do we want them to be better? Hell yes. Are good ones better than that? Way better, right? Every union I've ever worked with is literally, equally understood to be a force for the working class and against sexism, racism, homophobia, and every kind of ism that you can imagine. It's a place that actually creates a more fair and just workplace, not the opposite. But, do the limitations of the human species as we understand it in this country, enter into a trade union? Yeah, it's an institution of people. And part of why I am sticking with the union, as I say in the opening lines of the book, as a key strategy out of the crisis of this democracy, is because in some ways it is because trade unions sort of are this weird institutional force in America that unites very different people who don't share any common political belief the day they get hired, right? So it's like an example of how do you sit down with people who you don't have a shared identity with. Boss hires you, now you'll go work for some big company, you're a nurse in a hospital, whatever you are. You didn't walk into work because you pick, you don't get to pick your coworkers, right? The boss hires you and you go to work, and you're Republican, you're Democrat, you're probably like most people just sick of it all. You're not functioning, you're not participating in American democracy the way the framers kind of intended it, depending on who we are. So, it's part of what's beautiful about unions is they're messy and they're complicated, but at their very best, there is simply no replacing the ability to make radical progressive change in this country the way a good union can. And that, to me, is essential in 2020.
I want to talk about a couple of the strikes that you write about, but you also write about Silicon Valley. You just mentioned it. Like, how do you get, first of all, there's a sense, and you tell us if that sense is correct. There's a sense that people who work in those sectors are about as anti-union as you could get as a worker, I should say, right? That there's sort of like the philosophical I guess, pedigree of people who work in tech is supposedly more libertarian and anti-union than that. But address that, and then also how you go about unionizing folks in that type of environment.
Sure. I think a few things are true. First is, it actually reminds me of one of the last topics of conversation we had before the teacher strikes began to break out, and that was around what was then called Murphy Oil, but it's what was renamed Epic Systems. Right? Remember that? There was a call that you and I did where I was sort of freaking out about Murphy Oil. You were like, heck, we don't know the name of it, and they consolidated 3 cases of which Murphy Oil was one. And I want to start the conversation about Silicon Valley sort of from that conversation. So the Epic Systems ruling, which is linked to the Murphy Oil ruling, in some, and I cover it in the book, but in some essentially said, the Supreme Court of the United States essentially said, American workers, including in Silicon Valley and everywhere, are now able to be forced into what we call forced arbitration agreements. So your individual hire package, you're signing up the healthcare form, your schedule, your thing, your liability, and most workers don't even realize it. They sign little things saying, I agree to, binding forced arbitration by my employer to settle any disputes I may have with them. This is for folks who don't have a union, which, by the way, that's the vast majority of America right now.
Right.
So we know that even just since the ruling, a majority of American workers, hundreds of millions of people, are like being forced into these arbitration agreements. So how does this connect to the question you asked? The only way out of those forced arbitration agreements, that say you can't protest sexual harassment, you can't talk about sexual harassment in the workplace, you can't have a class action lawsuit against your employer over sexism, racism, or fill in the blank issues at work anymore. The only way out of that and out from under those agreements is to form a union and to negotiate collectively with your employer. So to me, that even makes it more clear that if you're walking around Silicon Valley where the same forces that have tried to act like the Great Society was being created by the high-tech industry, you really don't have a choice at this point except to actually try to form something called a union to get out from really, really egregious, really bad individual hiring agreements that are rampant in Silicon Valley. So, a whole bunch of things. One is, I think,
and just to be clear,
feel like,
let me just so that people understand this dynamic. The idea is that if you don't have the power of a union, it's not even a question. It's if you don't have the cover, almost on some level of not be, because if you walk in there and say I'm not signing that, they're just going to say, fine, goodbye.
Bye.
And
goodbye.
that's it. Because, on some level, it's like the dynamic where you have some retail outfits are like, yeah, I'm willing to pay, $15 an hour, but it's got to be the minimum wage because I can't compete against those other people who won't do it. And if it becomes a law for all of us, there's this strength in collectivity that benefits people who don't want to, because they're going to get it chopped off, stick out their neck alone in these instances.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is you saw this. Now we're going back a little over a year ago when the 20,000 Google workers first walked out, when they realized that one of the outgoing executives was getting this huge, reward for sexual harassment. He was being let go of, but on his way out the door, like lots of CEOs, going to get these ridiculous multi-million-dollar packages as they leave. So a lot of the women workers at Google said, this is an outrage, this is totally crazy. And they called for this big walkout. Fast forward a year and 3 months from now, because that was November of 2018, and you see what's really happening, which is that Google has now hired IRI Inc. That's one of the top union-busting firms in the United States of America. Interestingly, I write a lot about the impact and how IRI Inc., a professional union buster, works in a collective bargain, because in the chapter, which was the last big campaign that I was running on the ground in Philadelphia, where I talk about how workers can still form really strong unions in 2020, the workers in that campaign were going up against IRI Inc. Now, we won, and those workers have real protections and a collective bargaining agreement and a process to redress their abusive employers. At Google, where I do think that there are, as you say, there is this sort of idea that they're different, that they can individually work out their problems, that a union is part of a system that they want to disrupt, right? I mean, this would be the rap that they're running hard. And in the book, of course, on that chapter on tech, I give a long history from the early 1970s at Intel, where the Silicon Valley elite, as early as 1973, had it in their head that they were going to smash unions, that they understood that smashing workers' ability to force them to share the wealth was going to cut into their profit margin, right? So there's nothing new about what Google just did by hiring IRI Inc., a professional union busting firm. And by the way, what you saw happen in December were 4 senior Google engineers fired who were involved in that protest a year earlier. So, I got to say to tech workers, there is nowhere to go but forming a union. I mean, people can try and get around it, but there is no... If you want to be able to try and clean up the disgusting sexist gender abuses and imbalances, let alone the racism inside of the tech worker world, which is big, there simply is no way around that collective action and collective power, but codified through workers themselves forming the kind of union that they want to build. There is no way around that, whether it's the tech sector, whether it's an Amazon workhouse, or whether it's the high-level coders I describe at the beginning of that chapter, like Taylor Hesselgrave, right, who's this $120,000 a year coder, comes out of a Hackbright Academy, where the slogan is, essentially changing Silicon Valley by changing the ratio. Like they train all these women as coders, they put them into these big firms, and they all wind up getting fired or quitting anyway because the conditions are disgusting and sexist, and it's rampant in Silicon Valley. So, people can look at how do we innovate something new, which I think is the rep in Silicon Valley. It's all about innovation. And I'm like, some things like real news matter, and some things like collective power, where workers can stand up to their employer, are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago on the factory floor. That's just a fact.
What's interesting about that story is the way that it shows the interplay between what, particularly in this season right now, the relationship between things like sexism and racism and class, in that the union addresses what problems the workers have may be at different times, may be unique to a specific industry, or somewhat unique to a specific industry or a specific shop or whatnot. It is the fact that they're powerless, or the power dynamic is the thing that is consistent amongst all of the workers. The set of problems that powerlessness can't address may be different from shop to shop or industry to industry.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the point of having a collective agreement is, one, to get out of the individual forced arbitration agreements, which are rampant in that industry and anyone who's hiring today, right? Especially since the 2018 Supreme Court ruling. I mean, we already had a lot of workers under forced arbitration agreements, and every time I check the statistic, it's climbing rampantly. So now it's up to 60%. I had a lawyer last week tell me they think it's going to hit 75% soon. We're talking about the overwhelming majority of American workers, those who don't have a union, being forced into agreements that say things as egregious as, you cannot talk to your coworker about your salary. You cannot talk to your coworker if you've been sexually harassed. You cannot talk to anyone but the HR director, even if that's the person who harassed you. I mean, the language in these arbitration agreements that people are individually signing as they get hired on today, first of all, to even be able to read one and understand it, you have to be like a mini lawyer, right? That's why most workers just sign it. It's like, and also, by the way, it's what you said. You say, I don't want to sign this piece of paper. They walk you to the door. Goodbye.
And
so,
we should say, obviously arbitrators are, they're professional. They try and do their best, but they also, guess who's not going to ever hire an arbitrator? That is an individual worker working at one of these places. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean,
yeah, but they also say really crazy stuff. They say you can't pool, like some of them say things like literally, you cannot have class action lawsuits. You cannot pool your money.
Yep.
Each worker must individually pay the filing fee for arbitration, and for a whole lot of lower wage workers in this country, that first step is prohibitive. They don't even have the $500 to hire a lawyer to file for the arbitration. Like, it's feudalism.
Yep.
We are really, heading straight back into feudalism in some very crazy way in the workplace. So, what I do in that book, one of the most important things to me about this book, Sam, is that every single victorious story I tell takes place after Trump wins. And that's part of the point of the book, right? I'm like laying out story after story after story and then breaking down the analysis of how workers are winning in a post-Trump world. Because what I'm trying to show is, Jesus, forget, impeachment. I mean, whatever. With the only choice that workers have, given the current Supreme Court, given the current campaign finance system, given just those two set of factors alone, given control of the media institutions, workers have one choice in a very skewed political power structure right now. And by the way, that power structure is far worse than even last time you and I checked in together because of what's happening at that, not just the Supreme Court, but the astounding number of the federal judiciary that Trump has appointed, with McConnell just in there every damn day, appointing judges, appointing judge, appointing judge, appointing judge. It is astounding. And so when you think about how stacked the judiciary is against workers' rights or the climate or, ending racism or sexism or fill in the blank, and then you look at the political system, people are like, right, Jane, well, what we need to do is overturn Citizens United, and then it's going to be fine. I'm like, great. Holy happy shit. How are you going to do that, right? Like, there's only one way left in this country to force the corporate elite to the table, and it's by increasing the number of mass strikes. It's the same. We are in 1932 in the United States, where income inequality and power inequality go hand in hand, where workers have virtually no say over what's going on in the economy, their personal lives at this point, because the economy is so controlling of their schedules. And I keep saying to people, look, whether or not the most dangerous president ever gets reelected by stealing the election, or whether or not a fantasy candidate like Sanders or a Warren gets in, under either scenario, there is no choice in this country, and I really deeply believe this given the power structure, but for massive strikes to begin breaking out, even way more than we've seen in the last 2 years. But workers are getting their muscle back. The success of the strikes is spreading. My day job, which is all about helping people figure out how they can build the kind of unity that it takes to strike, is the only way we're going to get out of this mess. And I keep saying to people, give me another option. Like, how are we going to do it? Well, we have to overturn Citizens United. That's not an option. That's not happening in the current political system, right? So give me another strategy that's going to cause the kind of crisis in the streets that can force the employer class to the bargaining table, and I mean at the federal level, right? The civil rights, the major pieces of worker legislation and civil rights legislation, by which I mean gender and race solutions in this country, all were the result of chaos being created, strategic, not stupid, strategic chaos being created in key geographies, in key moments, in key economic sectors, with the power to create the kind of crisis that forces federal legislation changes. There is no other way right now.
All right, now I wanted to get to Einstein, but let's stay on this for a little bit because this is the kit and caboodle to a certain extent. I mean, walk me through that a little bit. I mean, like, I know, like, the airlines, what the flight attendants did. On some level,
Karen Else's leadership in the flight attendants. Yeah.
Yes, is to me is one of the best examples of the power of labor on something that ostensibly is not directly related, right? Like, it's not a one-to-one relationship. If we strike, there's not going to be any classes today.
Right.
It is if we strike, we're going to shut down, travel across the country, and that's going to cause headaches for our alumni. Like, walk us through. So the idea is that people, obviously vote, make your phone calls, choose a candidate. It's going to be helpful to have a pro-labor president who's maybe going to help in terms of like legislative acts and appointing judges who are going to rule and changing the National Labor Relations Board and changing the Labor Department. But at the end of the day, there has to be power on the street. This is the one thing that you can engage in that is you don't have to worry about where we're going to be in 6 months or even 6 years because all of it's going to be relevant. But how does that work? Like, give me your sense of, or is that not predictable? Is it impossible to predict sort of like what the chain of events are? Or is it you just like you do a certain thing, organizing, and good things will come from it?
Good question. So no, I mean, I would argue part of what I try and do in the book, right, is I'm walking back and forth between contemporary victories, how they work, and then I'm walking backwards into the early 1930s. And I do that because I am trying to show that the last time that we created the kind of crisis that leveled the power of corporate America is going to look a lot like this time, and that we had slightly more sense of strategy, I think, back then, but I think we're getting there right now, and that's what's encouraging. So if you look at the early 1930s, Great Depression happened. Part of what I try and argue in the book and show is that the misery factor right now, I actually think that the misery level is as high as it was in the Great Depression. It just plays out differently. It's profound. The number of underemployed, multiple jobs, can't see their kids, locking the kids in, whatever. I mean, the conditions when you get out of sort of like the middle-class comfort of a handful of big cities where unions, frankly, still help make the states better, like a California, New York, a D.C., a handful of other places, it's miserable out there. There's an opioid crisis for a reason in this country. The birth rate's going down for a reason in this country. The suicide rate is up for a reason in this country. These are not funny statistics. They're sick, and the country is sick right now. So that's how it felt in the early 1930s, and we either were trending towards a authoritarian fascist outcome, which, by the way, did happen, as we well know, in the 30s in a whole lot of places, or we're going to head in a direction where that kind of misery translates into something that's progressive and popular. So in the 1930s, very smart trade union leaders understood the same dangers that very smart trade union leaders understand today, which is misery is taking us in one of two directions, and we better be leading our way out of this mess in a progressive way. So in the 30s, they targeted a handful of key industries, and let's just say that steel and auto, coal, a handful of the biggest industries were considered to be the most strategic industries. It was not workers in the trade unions trying to strike every Tom, Dick, and Harry workplace. It was not trying to strike every sector, and it was not trying to strike every city. It was a strategy that said there's a set of key industries, and if we strike those key industries and a handful of key geographies, by which I mean you do an overlay of the map. You figure out where the most pain's going to be caused. You figure out where the CEOs are going to feel it. You figure out where you can get away with the strike because the dogs and the guns and the batons and the hoses are not going to get called on you as badly as in another city, right? So all of this is like when you're making a national map to create a crisis to force the employer class to the table so that Congress can then fix the broken National Labor Relations Act and fix the broken Voting Rights Act and fix the broken Civil Rights Act and fix every single goddamn thing that Trump's forces are ruining right now, to restore them and make them even better is going to require strategic strikes in strategic labor markets, which sometimes cross a state line. And that is what we're seeing the beginning of. And I want to just say the only thing that the corporate elite in this country need from workers is that they show up and they go to work. It's the only thing they need. They don't want workers voting. They don't want poor people voting. The voter suppression laws, the Electoral College, the whole thing is going to screw up, our ability to sort of vote our way out of this process. So there's one thing and one thing only that has worked in this country to force radical changes, and that is when workers stop employers from earning money, and we need way more of it fast.
Okay, and I get I'm getting flooded here with questions, but one of the things that I learned, and I've harped on this interview too many times, but this book Wrecked, about how the auto industry screwed themselves because they wanted to diminish the power of labor, and they changed their supply chain essentially on how they built cars. That ended up destroying the quality of their cars, U.S. cars. But through that, I understood the idea that you could have down the line in terms of a supplier, all you needed was a half a dozen people who work at the ball bearing plant that provides the ball bearings for one piece of equipment on the car, and they could shut everything down. And so, as opposed to you don't need 30,000, factory workers to do this.
Exactly right.
You could have 5 guys who are in another shop outside of Detroit who are like, we're going on strike. We just shut down the supply line. And that's why, these car makers moved away from that to disempower workers like that. But you're saying that on a national scale that exists.
Have it.
Right. Okay. So who?
So, for example, look at where Bezos, crazy Jeff, crazy billionaire, should be cleaning toilets for poor people for the rest of his lives, in my opinion, Bezos is doing. I just saw he's guaranteeing 2-hour food delivery time if you're Prime or something, not just 2-day delivery on every package from God, under the sun. We are living in a just-in-time production moment in terms of a lot of the service economy, and that's why they hire profound union busters, right? Because they understand that the logistics sector, if you took out 5 strategic Amazon warehouses, the whole thing's going down. There ain't no damn 2-day delivery happening if you know which 5 you need to pick. Similarly, in the airline industry, let's go back to Sarah Nelson and the flight attendants. She's the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, AFA. And when she stood up last year, close to this time last year, after the sickest, after Trump forcing 700,000 federal workers to come to work without paying them, right? That was going on every day for a month. People forget because the news cycle is so insane. So when he was doing that last year and people were like, the TSA workers should strike, the federal workers should walk off the job, that was a little bit naive because frankly they'll be fired in a second. But suddenly a smart union decided, hey, our contract gives us the right to say, we don't have to board the airplane if the conditions are unsafe. That's the basic clause in the flight attendants union, that after several weeks of the TSA workers working overtime with no pay and deeply frustrated, and the FAA and the air traffic, everybody, the flight attendants just said, wait a minute, it's not safe to get on these planes anymore, and we're not going to get on them. And within hours, some air traffic controllers, LaGuardia didn't come to work, and within hours, the federal shutdown was over. So when there's a storm, let's just go to a snowstorm. I got stuck in Chicago last week, right? I didn't get out because of one storm. And when one storm happens and a set of flights don't arrive, it causes chaos for days. The flight attendants union, the AFA, actually has a program called Operation Chaos. They understand very well that if flight attendants don't board a handful of strategic planes at a handful of moments, the entire system is going to go off, right? So there's a lot of possibility in this country for ordinary workers to force a reset of the power imbalance that's going on in this country. It's just that people need to start seeing it working, and that's the beauty of things like the Los Angeles teachers' strike. When they walked out. Now, we're in exactly the 1-year anniversary, by the way. This week was the week that the 35,000 teachers in Los Angeles walked off the job, which had a ripple effect of, 1 million people's lives being affected. And they won an extraordinary series of improvements for the kids in those schools. That was not a fight about salaries. That was a fight about ending the kind of austerity that lets the billionaire elite of Silicon Valley live in California, not pay any damn taxes, disrupt and destroy the public school system, and the power of the LA teachers actually reset that power structure in Los Angeles, like the second largest city in the country. So there is, I say, not only is there a huge possibility of how we're going to reset the power imbalance and the disgusting racist, sexist, white nationalist crap going on in this country, but I'm waiting for someone to show me any other way. I don't see any other possibility for how we're going to fix the mess we're in, except for workers to start working off the job in the kind of numbers that we did in the early 1930s and the kind of numbers that we did in the mid-60s in the sort of public sector.
So who who does, I mean, in the case, and folks can go back, I think we've spoken to Sarah Nelson at least 2 or 3 times since that strike, because I mean, I think, just conversations with you in the past, but just others. I mean, I could see that was something fundamentally different in terms of the way that it was, how strategic it was. That is a situation where it's reactive, right? Where the scenario is created by McConnell shutting down the government, and Sarah Nelson was adept enough to realize, like, oh, we're in a position, we have a lot of power in this situation. Where does that strategy come from when we're looking at a sort of in a proactive way, where we don't have a specific scenario? I mean, you talk about the broad misery, and it seems to me the difference between the misery in the 30s and today is one was a misery that left people idle enough that they could get together and meet. This misery is one that keeps people so busy that it becomes more of a challenge to organize on some level. But where does the proactive, like, who's sitting back and whose responsibility is it to sit back and say, I'm looking at this, supply chain that is the United States. We don't need the people, or maybe we need the people at this warehouse for Amazon to strike as opposed to that one, or this industry as opposed to that one. Like, who's doing that work?
Well, there are definitely.
Can you not tell me?
I mean, first of all, I can't tell you in great detail. Although I'm sure that the 5 most powerful, wealthy corporations of the world could tell us right now, since they're listening to everyone, right, from Alphabet to Google to Facebook to Amazon. But everyone's turning on those devices and letting them listen in their own homes. But anyway, not me. But anyway, so let's just start with Amazon. One of the most intractable corporations right now. Enormous growth spurt, super ripe for the kind of disruption that we're describing. There is, in fact, what we call a global table, which means there are a set of unions from all over the world, from Germany to the rest of Europe to here. One thing that's been different about my life since I spoke to you is I spent more than half a year last year working in Germany among the German unions and trying to get ahead of understanding some of the sectoral bargaining. The German Works Councils, come to it a different day if we want to, but the promise or peril of the system that people keep talking about. So I spent a lot of time in Europe, and I can tell you that there are very serious coordination conversations beginning about how to go after folks in the global supply chain, and that involves all different kinds of unions. Is it happening fast enough? Not from my view, right? I mean, the planet's burning down, literally in Australia, and flooding to death when we stop burning. And so, is it happening? Yes, it is. Do we need it to happen faster and better? Definitely. And part of the way that it's going to happen faster and better on the proactive side of this, and this takes me back to the education sector for a minute, because I actually do. I mean, I think the crisis of austerity, meaning the intentional withdrawal by the super rich and the corporate elite from the tax system, forcing what appears to be budget shortfalls that have an effect on the quality of life of everyday Americans, from how good's the public school system to Medicaid to Medicare to, is our water system poisoned? Is there a regulator there? Does anyone know, right? I mean, austerity is this really damning thing. On the proactive side, I think the best illustration of unions getting together and starting to say, we got to stop this because they're literally killing people, is in the education sector and some of those strikes, right? It's pretty impressive. I mean, there have been a set of progressive educators starting in 2012 in Chicago on the heels of the victory of the first Chicago teachers' strike, which re-raised workers' expectations, that actually, despite the rhetoric, despite the media attack, despite the public relations offensive against teachers and all workers, the strike still works when we do it well. The intentionality with which the California-based educators unions who went on strike last year, the planning that went into that, they were absolutely waking up every morning for several years saying, how can we reset a disgusting power imbalance where taxpayer money in California, the little bit that exists, is getting diverted to corporate, meaning money-making, privatized education system and away from the black and brown kids who fill the public schools in California. And the teachers took it and ran with it and won and are still winning, right? And now have a ballot initiative on the California ballot that's going to retax corporations in a massive way in this state should it pass in November. And that 1-2 punch is the most brilliant strategic work, among the most brilliant strategic work I've seen going, is how do we first mobilize people around the picket lines and then take them to the polls, right? And actually get them voting in ballot measures that are going to make the super rich pay their taxes again. Because if we can't recreate a well-run regulatory system, as Trump is dismantling it day in and day out, we can't really take control of the lives of ordinary American workers. So there is some really smart, proactive stuff going on. Do we need more of it? Hell yes, way more of it.
Jane McAlevey, I could talk to you all day, but maybe we should do this again soon because I would actually like to hear about your time in Germany. The book is A Collective Bargain: Unions Organizing in the Fight for Democracy. And folks, if you want to, so I would start with no shortcuts. Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age, I believe it was.
Yeah.
But get both books. We will put a link to both of them at majority.fm. Jane, always a pleasure to talk to you. Really fascinating and inspiring stuff.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for the great work.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Really interesting. And all roads lead back to that interview wrecked. Who knew?
I don't think we put that on
the best of
either, but that's a 2020 best of then.
I guess I just think it's like a little bit dry, but it was at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. So I knew we still had play in 2020, but God knows where we're going to be at the end of this year. But I mean, I think that is that dynamic, that lesson, which I don't even know that I ever like pulled out that far from that wrecked lesson. And Jane just put it there, which is just like when you are getting in these fights, you look at I mean, it's age old, right? You look at the weakest link on the chain, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to blow up the whole chain. You just need to find the weakest link. That's where you have the most amount of power. And the power is invested in us, in our status as workers. Now, I am a boss and a manager of all of you, and I lord over you as the boss. I'll put you in the box if you don't. But if one of you guys did not show up,
if Brendan and I walked out of here right now, there'd
be a big problem.
Yeah, talk about a strategic strike.
That would be a big problem. We would all move to we would just do a one camera up into my face like this on YouTube, and I would just hold it to the computers here. But yeah, read Jane's books. I mean, particularly, it's just fascinating. And I think there is, I think ultimately, regardless of who wins as the president, certainly this is, Sanders' agenda in particular is to get people to be thinking in this manner, using their power of, there's a reason why he's developing all these relationships. It's not just like developing, but he's nurturing, he is going and supporting all of these labor actions and unions and whatnot, because his whole worldview is built upon this notion that it really is ultimately the real power resides within labor and ultimately their ability to withhold labor. And everything else is commentary on some level. And that is true. And there's, obviously there's a big difference in terms of like providing some empowerment via legislation and via executive action, et cetera, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, withholding that labor is what it takes. And we saw it in states where, supposed right to work states where teachers were able to exercise their ability to withhold that labor. All right, we're going to head into the fun half. Nomiki and I are going to be talking about, we'll be talking about the 2020 race, and we'll be talking about, impeachment and all fun stuff, and it'll be crazy. In the meantime, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member of the Majority Report at jointhemajorityreport.com, what you get is not only do you support the free show, not only do you get the free show free of commercials, but you also get extra content every single day. Although yesterday, I guess you didn't get extra content. But that was good stuff. I listen to that every day. In fact, yesterday I listened to the podcast as I was in here building new shelves, and we're going to try and make the rest of the studio look presentable on camera. We're working on it, but yesterday was a nightmare. But I had that podcast we put out yesterday is like 2 hours or something. I don't know. But jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, AM Quickie. We're now getting it out the door by 8 a.m., folks. So check it out, amquickie.com. The more of you who subscribe, the more it helps. And just a reminder, the Embark Dog DNA test kit. Oh, I saw that.
You saw what?
That tweet.
Which one? I saw a few of them. About the lineage?
Yeah, you can actually. They actually do. If they do have records of your dog's lineage, they actually send you. Yeah. Somebody said that they got a picture of a dog that was related to their dog or something to that effect.
It's so funny. I spit so hard laughing I couldn't control it.
The Embark Dog DNA Test Kit. It is the key to unlocking your dog's unique breed mix and genetically informed health needs. So you can keep your pup alive. You can rather keep your pup, help your pup live its healthiest life. Apparently, it's super easy to swab your dog and get this information. That's according to Kelly. And you get updates from Embark as they put the DNA samples through the process. You can learn about your dog's breed. You can learn that your dog may have a genetic predisposition to a certain disease, and maybe they need to have a different diet, or maybe they need to be screened at certain times. All that. Hugely important, helpful. You love your dog, and this can both give you a practical and sort of emotional peace of mind. Right now, Embark has an exclusive offer you can't get anywhere else. Go to embarkvet.com right now. Use the promo code MAJORITY. Save 15% off your dog DNA test kit. Visit Embark, EMBARK, vet.com. Use the promo code MAJORITY to save. Nomiki, do you want to give a plug for your show?
Oh, that's news. Yes, of course. If you would like to learn about how the establishment plays games on us, how they're structured. What is this ecosystem that they have where there's like a bat signal sent and suddenly everybody's on the same message calling us all Bernie bros. If you want to understand that, this is the show for you. It's called The Nomiki Show. You can go to patreon.com/ there's a backslash, / The Nomiki Show, and subscribe. We're going to have lots of freebies, and we're going to figure that all out as we go, I guess. Do you have any advice for me?
Yes, do your show well.
Oh, okay. The pressure.
Do it right on a regular basis. That's the important thing. No, it's going to be great. You don't need any advice.
See, we have something in common.
You and I
mean, a lot of things in common, but we have show experiences.
DNA test.
My dog is not inbred. Yes, that's I think why they do that. By the way, because there's a lot of inbreeding with.
Yes.
So it makes a little bit more sense.
Yep.
But aside from dog DNA, we had the same partner for a show when I had a show on Sirius XM. Some of you know what? Me from
that's what we should do someday for an extra.
Oh, that's good.
People have heard some of that story, and longtime listeners will remember the era when I was doing this show, and then I would go run uptown and do a 3-hour radio show. That lasted for about 2 months. But the reason why it lasted for 2 months had to do with this guy. So.
I lasted a little bit longer. I almost pulled all of my hair out by the end and started bringing bottles of wine on set.
That guy. Check out TMBS. The Lula interview is not going to go up until
it's going to drop tomorrow.
That's so
tomorrow.
Exciting.
Yeah, part 1 is dropping tomorrow, and also check out tickets available still for the Bell House show on February 7th. That's a Friday. Tickets going fast, so get those.
But there is a show tonight.
There's a show tonight. I'm not sure exactly who's on there tonight, but we'll do a show tonight.
Okay.
Oh, I have another plug.
Go.
And Michael, too, is doing this. On January 28th at Harvard, for those of you who just, are Harvard students or hang around Harvard or want to go there, there's going to be this incredible evening of panels. Michael is going to be on a panel with Cornel West. Wait, I have to look up who else is on here. I'm going to be on a panel with Crystal Ball, Megan Day, myself. Yeah, it's about the media and the party. It's kind of funny. I'm on the media panel, not the party panel, so the Democratic Party. So
there you go.
It'll be fun.
Check it out. That's February 20th, next Tuesday.
January 28th.
January 28th. Yeah. Matt.
Oh, yeah, Literary Hangover, folks. Subscribe to it.
Also, don't forget the Antifada, patreon.com/the Antifada. All right, see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5/8, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's the famous fun half. We are back. The president has escaped the country. He is on the lam. He has found refuge at Davos, where I think this is the first time at Davos. Because,
As president.
Yeah. Because, he's the man of the people. So he doesn't want to be hanging out with all these billionaires because he's such a populist, such a guy's guy. Every guy. But here he is. He's got a serious thing to talk about, how the wealthy people have saved one of the things that he loves, which is the Cathedral of Notre Dame.
In France, another century-long project continues to hold such a grip on our hearts and our souls that even 800 years after its construction, when the cathedral...
Oh, pause it. We should start this again. I should tell you, he's reading these words. So if you're not aware that he's staring into a teleprompter and you think he's having some type of aneurysm, you should just know that he just has an inability to read. You know, like, he's got to be pretty adept at a teleprompter now. I'm really just getting the sense that, like, I'm not going to read it beforehand. Just put it up there and I'll figure it out.
In France, another century-long project continues to hold such a grip on our hearts and our souls that even 800 years after its construction, when the Cathedral of Notre Dame was engulfed in flames last year, such a sad sight to watch, unbelievable sight, especially for those of us that considered it one of the great monuments.
I was one of those people.
And representing so many different things.
I was about to buy it.
Represented
the whole
so
world
many different
grieved.
things to me.
Through her sanctuary now stands scorched and charred.
Through her.
And a sight that's hard to believe.
Hard to believe.
When you get used to it, to look at it now, hard to believe. But we know
did everybody
that
get used to
Notre
looking at it?
Dame will be restored magnificently.
Oh, God. By Trump 2020.
I mean...
Is he going to buy it? Is that what he's offering?
I'm not thinking about impeachment. I am not worried about Lev Parnas or John Bolton. I'm not worried. A good thing they have me over here in Davos.
Which is near Paris.
Right.
Does he know he's not in France?
I get the... I'm not even clear he knows... I don't think he could tell you what day it is based upon that performance. That was pretty bad. I mean...
Wow.
I've read stuff, cold, and it's not easy, but he doesn't seem to be even like remotely close to where he is on that topic. Like,
well, to be fair, there's a lot of jet lag.
There's a lot of lag.
I'm kidding. There is, but it's not an excuse.
There's a lot of jet lag from traveling.
What was the
lag from traveling?
What was the mindset? Like, why did his speechwriters decide to go with this? Was it just like, let's throw something out there?
I think the idea is that, we're going to try and make him look magnanimous and not be petty about his impeachment. That's the intent. And I got really used to seeing it.
A lot of people think it's a pretty historic church. I was one of those people.
Some of us think. That was like, there had someone who, I can't even remember the context of this, but, some people, I like it. I refer to this as a computer monitor, whereas you may have some other way of referring to it. Just like it's a weird construct. Yes, some of us thought that Notre Dame was an important place.
Others wanted to start on fire.
All right. Let's get into, let me take a quick phone call here, and then, because we got, somebody got the pole position. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? That's weird. There's three of them. 210.
This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. What's on your mind, John?
Yeah, in the latest Suffolk poll in New Hampshire.
Not even a hello?
Bernie yeah, you there?
Yeah, I am. That's what I said.
Okay.
A lot of people just say
in the latest Suffolk poll in New Hampshire has Bernie up by 1 point over Biden, with Bernie at 19% and Biden at 18%. A polling average in New Hampshire, Bernie leads with 21%, Biden 20%, Buttigieg 14.5%, Warren with 14.6%. which puts them on the bubble from receiving any delegates in each of the 2 districts and in statewide totals. If you look at the polling aggregators, you see that Biden is up in the last 2 Iowa polls, but this is highly misleading. On Sunday, Neighborhood Research released a poll where voters under 50 only comprised 19% of the vote, while 58% of its participants were over 65. It's like they took a poll in a retirement home. So yesterday, David Bender released a poll which had also favored Biden, while they have a better reputation than Neighborhood and Research. They don't release any crosstabs, so you don't know how many voters under 45 or under 50 are being interviewed. So both polls are being used by 538, and Real Clear Politics is using the Bender poll. I refuse to use these polls, because they're so faulty. Before these 2 polls came out, 538 had Bernie up with a slight lead. Now he's down by 4 points to Biden. So Bernie still leads Iowa in British betting markets as well as on Predicted and PredictWise. So there are 4 congressional districts in Iowa. In 2016, according to the Green Papers, Bernie won the most votes in District 1 and 2, which represent the east side of the state. But since those results are so close, Bernie and potential Trump supporter Clinton split the delegates in those districts.
That's great.
District 3, which encompasses Des Moines, had 7 delegates in 2016. Clinton won 4 and Bernie won 3. This year they have 8 delegates. Bernie is faring much better in urban areas, according to polling, than he did in 16. So I hope that his newfound strength in urban areas will help him this year in the 3rd district. District 4 is a district that Steve King represents that has 5 delegates. In 16, Bernie and Clinton also split the 6 delegates it had then. So 14 delegates are based on statewide totals, and for the first time in Iowa, they will release the vote totals, and also the totals, after the viability, the 15% threshold, and they'll also, have each congressional district totals. So if a candidate hits 15% in the state totals, they will receive delegates. 14 delegates are available from those totals, and broken down, it's 9 at large and 5 from party leaders.
All right. Well, John, appreciate the phone call. I did notice your tweet about that poll this weekend, and I took it to heart. But I think, and I appreciate the phone call, John. We're gonna talk about that stuff now. Actually, yeah.
Can I make one other comment about my call on Friday? Sure. You notice Bernie leaked the thing about Warren being his potential vice president and being the Treasury Secretary in a Ryan Grimm piece on The Intercept.
Yep.
So I mean, they're very much aware that Warren could possibly, be a kingmaker, but
of course,
I mean, obviously, I want Bernie to win on the first ballot. So I mean, but everybody knows what's going on with that.
Yep. I think the leak, I think, was timed to remind Warren supporters that Bernie holds her in high esteem.
Right.
I think is the point of that. And I think that was genuine. I think they actually did do that. And I think they all are interested in that. Why wouldn't they be? Appreciate the call, John. All right, let's talk.
Okay, shit, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. He didn't even say hi to me. He just went right into it.
We're in the.
It's focused.
We are coming down to crunch time here.
Yeah, we don't have time for.
No, there's no time for pleasure.
He's like Bernie. He's like Bernie in that way.
Yeah.
Let's play this clip and then we'll get into it. Let's play this clip of. Do we have that Bernie about I don't say happy birthday?
Oh, I have a fun little response to that.
Okay, all right, we'll do that in a second. But all right, so Nomiki.
You can call me Nomi.
I will.
I feel like
but now that I've learned it,
now
that I've learned Nomiki, I want to just like nail it in.
Are you Samuel?
I am.
Right.
People, that is actually my formal name, Samuel Lincoln. Actually, yeah. I don't want to get too formal, but so Bernie apologized. Let's just start with this. There's a piece by Zephyr Teachout. I think everybody's familiar with Zephyr Teachout. She ran for Congress in the 19th district, not this past cycle, but the cycle before. I should even say, let's start before that. She ran against Andrew Cuomo in what was, by all accounts, just a way to take a piece out of him. I mean, I don't think anybody when the campaign launched thought that she would have a chance of beating him. Mm-hmm. Although, you know, she got like 35% if memory serves correct in the primary. And
she ran as an anti-corruption person because Andrew Cuomo shut down the Anti-Corruption Commission. The
Moreland Commission.
Which was investigating him.
And so Cuomo shut that down. But she's a law professor. This is like campaign finance is basically her jam, as it were. And she wrote a piece in The Guardian called Middle Class, quotes, Joe has a corruption problem. It makes him a weak candidate. And there's nothing, you know, this is not the only part about it that's controversial in any way is whether this makes him a weak candidate.
Right.
That's, you know, it's an opinion piece. I happen to think it does. But the idea of like calling this out as being such a horrific thing to do is odd, the way that people responded to this, because she's not trying to gin it up. Now, supposedly, Paul Krugman said, like, how could you do this before the impeachment trial? Well, we're 2 weeks out from Iowa.
Yeah.
And this is when this stuff should be aired and does get aired. But this is nothing. There's nothing new about this assessment of Joe Biden. I mean, just because Donald Trump tried to dig this stuff up in Ukraine, that's not where this stuff came from.
Right.
This stuff was pre-existing, and that's why they were looking for that.
And out in the open, nonetheless.
Out in the open. In fact, let's go back to 2000, and this is back in 2008. I think in the fall of 2008, right? Is that right? Or is this, and this lefty, huge lefty, who has this big left-wing talk show that he was hosting at the time, he was interim, called Meet the Press. And a guy named Tom Brokaw brought this up 8 years ago.
Those of his son Hunter, who is 38 years old, and that's a reference to your son being hired right out of law school by a big company here in Delaware that is in the credit card business, MBNA. He got about $100,000 a year, as I recall. You received $214,000 in campaign contributions from the company and from its employees. At the same time, you were fighting for a bankruptcy bill that MBNA really wanted to get passed through the Senate, making it much tougher for everyone to file bankruptcy. Senator Obama was opposed to the bill. Among other things, you couldn't, in fact, claim that you had a problem because of big medical bills. You voted against an amendment that would call for a warning on predatory lending. You also called for you opposed efforts to strengthen the protection of people in bankruptcy. This has been an issue that you've heard about before. Your son was working for the company at the same time. In retrospect, wasn't it inappropriate for someone like you in the middle of all this to have your son collecting money from this big credit card company while you were on the floor protecting its interest?
Absolutely not. My son graduated from Yale Law School. The starting salary in Wall Street was $140,000 a year if he went to lawyer. Options he had. He came home to work for a bank. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. All right, now, look, I don't want to get like, $100,000 in Delaware versus $140,000 in New York City. I'll take the $100,000 in Delaware, but that's not the point. The point isn't even that Joe Biden was doing what he was doing because his son was working there.
Right.
The point is they're so intermeshed. This is the world that he's swimming in.
It's called a conflict of interest. Maybe he skipped that class at Yale Law School.
It's a conflict of interest but it also is just indicative of like how tight the relationship is between the money. Look, back in at least 2008, maybe before that, he was referred to as the senator from MBNA.
Right.
I mean, this is not new stuff. And the idea that people are treating it as if it's like this creation of Bernie Sanders. No, and I got news for you folks. If Sam Seder can find that on Twitter, Donald Trump's campaign is going to find Tom Brokaw on Twitter saying that thing too.
You know, something to keep in mind here that I don't think has been expressed enough, and maybe instead of using the word corruption, which from Zephyr Teachout has a different meaning than from Twitter, right?
Right.
She's a corruption expert. She wrote a book on corruption.
She's talking about systemic corruption of our democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. So keeping that all in mind, this is the senator who, with that bankruptcy bill, this is 2008. This is right before the financial collapse, right? Or right around that time. This bankruptcy bill led to over 100,000 foreclosures per month to this day, continuously, 100,000 plus foreclosures per month. That was a bill that he advocated for, that was looped in with all these credit card, and that's where the empire lies. I mean, Delaware is credit card empire. Yep. And so, his argument could be, I'm representing the interests of my community, like Cory Booker was with pharmaceutical companies or whatever, all of the, weapons manufacturers, this is my district. But at the end of the day, this guy has 30 years of a record. And, I think what's driving me crazy about the Democrats right now, the establishment Democrats, capital D Democrats and their consultants and everybody who's online, is that it's not just an attack. It's that they don't like that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump have the same message. And so they're trying to loop them together. Well, if Donald Trump says it, then, Bernie's in line with Trump. And it's really cheap. I've seen a lot of it online with very sophisticated, smart consultants who have, are contributors to CNN. And ultimately, it's to silence Bernie. And so I think, my opinion is I don't think Bernie should have apologized. I think that, if you're going to call him corrupt, everyone's got to be on the same message. And you have to explain why he's corrupt and make it very clear so that everybody from a Twitter follower to your co-chairs of your campaign have that message handy so they can rebut. And I think the issue is that there wasn't a coherent message across the campaign, and they were scrambling, and reporters online were saying this. What's the right answer? Bree Joy Gray, the press secretary for Bernie Sanders, went on with Katie Tur on MSNBC the other day, and she said, "Well, what is it? You're not standing. Is he corrupt or is he not corrupt?" That's what Katie Tur was saying, and she did a great job responding in light of the fact that the campaign did not have a message.
Right. I mean, I think there is one of the things about I think the campaign is that there is an ethos, particularly this year, this go round, in terms of the way that they're doing organizing.
Right.
There's an ethos of empowering and disaggregating sort of the power and allowing people to freelance. Mm-hmm. So you get like that talking point with Elizabeth Warren is disseminated without having to go all the way up the chain, but not necessarily down. It's not just one person writing it, and that's and this is it's a live by the sword, die by the sword type of situation, because the flip side of that is, and David Dayen has a piece up about this right now. For instance, when Bernie is in the Senate with Klobuchar and Warren,
that's right.
Because of the impeachment hearings, at some level he has the advantage because of the organization that he has built, or theoretically, right? Like, I mean, this has been my feelings for 6 to 8 months, is that Iowa is going to be a big test. At the end of the day, this stuff, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. If Sanders is able, his entire theory, not just of his campaign, but of his governance, is based upon this idea that I'm going to activate, or I'm going to get low propensity voters to engage in the system. I'm going to give them reasons to believe that their issue sets, which they agree with me, can actually they can act. I'm going to make them feel like they're empowered, which is going to bring them out. They're going to vote. They're going to caucus or whatnot. And then they're also going to hit the streets or do whatever it takes to help me get my agenda across. Iowa is the proof of concept. If he can't do it in Iowa, there's little reason to believe that he can do it other places. Right. But if we see Iowa come in, and that's why, like, when, John calls in about these polls, like, so what? Because I don't think if this is working properly, it's not the idea that 2 polls are showing that in the aggregate, Biden has a 3-point lead in Iowa is not going to mean anything. In fact, it's going to work to his benefit, because if Bernie's theory is correct, and if they've been able to execute it, then the number in which he wins in Iowa is going to go beyond what any poll predicted he would.
Right.
Right? Because these are voters who the models would assume would not be participating, almost definitionally, right? That's the nature, low propensity voters. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how this goes. I think, personally, I don't have that much. I'm sort of agnostic about the sorry thing. I mean,
I have, the other side of this is, and looking at it from possibly the establishment strategy. So we're going into impeachment. Senators cannot comment for hours during the impeachment. They're taking they're leaving their phones out. They're not allowed to talk, which, senators not talking is crazy. They love airtime. So Bernie's going to have to be silent. And as we're going into impeachment, and he's going to be sitting there in this trial, the movement, which doesn't have one message, which has been picked apart by the establishment, and they've been gearing up this Bernie Bro 2.0, especially with Hillary Clinton today coming out and attacking Bernie. I think what they're trying to do, starting with Warren, moving into Biden being attacked, and look at how divisive we are, into Hillary Clinton, coming back up and saying that, Bernie's bad for the party, he's not a Democrat, whatever, the same crap she always says, is they're trying to solidify that anti-Bernie support, right, and move it into Warren land. But also for people who are on the fence, who may have forgotten about 2016, to see, oh, right, he is divisive. And I don't like to see these fights play out. And, maybe I'm just going to go with the person who claims to be the unifying force. Now, if I were Bernie's campaign, I would be coming out ignoring what Hillary said, and just saying, we are the only campaign that has a multiracial, multi-generational, working class and poor people's movement behind them. We have more small dollar donation than ever in the history of campaigns, and we have raised more money.
Well, that's why I tend to think that the apology is okay, because it's providing that type of air cover. It's basically saying, like, this is not going to inhibit what we're doing on the ground. I don't think that there are people who are going to be demoralized, who are in Iowa, excited to vote for Bernie, who are going to be like, he shouldn't have apologized to Joe Biden. If anything, what you get out of it is you get another 24-hour cycle, frankly, on the piece, the original piece. So that people are reading people are reading Zephyr Teachout's piece in the first place. And you'll notice that any criticism of this has nothing to, they never say the word Zephyr Teachout. No. They never do. It was because, David Sirota sent it around in an email blast. They talk about Sirota, but all he was doing was linking back to this piece that Zephyr Teachout wrote. But they'll never mention Zephyr Teachout. Now, Teachout is a surrogate. I mean, I don't think she's I don't know if she's a paid surrogate. I don't think so. Not paid. But she's a surrogate. I think, with the blessing of the campaign, but I don't know that she did that on their.
Just one more point, though. If something does happen, which probably will, given this news cycle right now, and Bernie is held up, who is going to calm the waters? He's had to step in to basically calm everything down with the last 5, 6, 7, 8 hits that he's gotten. I mean, today he said, just now, a reporter, I can't remember who it was, one of the reporters said, they asked Bernie about the Hillary comments, and he says, on a good day, my wife likes me, because Hillary said nobody likes Bernie Sanders. Right. So he has this way of just mostly neutralizing stories. And if he's not around, who's going to do that?
Right. I mean, they're going to take advantage of this. However, let me counterpoint. If I wanted to sort of say, like, how can I get our top surrogates, who are literally the most exciting politicians in the country right
yeah.
now. How can I get them to be all over Iowa,
right?
Sit back, take a couple of days to rest, but at crunch time, put in like, you know, my Michael Jordan, LeBron, whatever it is, and sit back, you know, and not have to travel as much. How could I possibly get away with doing that? The press would all be all over me.
Right.
Well, boom. I mean, because AOC is going to double her efforts in Iowa now because she has to.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to send down the squad. It's going to be all over Iowa. And she's the most exciting politician in the country.
Absolutely.
And so it's going to be fascinating to see the way this plays out. I mean, you know, just from that perspective. But I'm encouraged, but I think at the end of the day, it's just a question of whether they've been able to execute their fundamental. It's not just their fundamental campaign strategy. It's also their sort of like the fundamental raison d'etre, if you will, of the entire campaign of it being a movement. There is no difference between what they're doing now. Yeah. Well, there's some, but not much. Between what they're doing now and how they will intend to wield politics when they're in office. And that is the thing that distinguishes Sanders' campaign from the others. I mean, I think that, like, you know, from a policy perspective, I don't think that there is the daylight that people that others perceive between Warren and Sanders. But in terms of the political power and reshaping our politics and in executing these things and having a lasting, durable change, if, and it's a big if, Sanders' theory is correct and they're able to execute it, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that type of like fundamental change.
And fundamentally, that, we've been saying this for years now, since the day Trump was inaugurated. Bernie Sanders has been building a movement that defeats Trump for the last, 5 years at this point, and no other candidate has done that. The Democratic Party proved through the same strategy that they could not deliver a defeat of Trump, and Trump is essentially going to throw out the same playbook against Joe Biden, for the general election. And the Democrats have proven that they're not able to solidify that support, maybe in defeating Bernie, because they're really good at controlling elections that they can control, and manipulate. And we'll talk about that later.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders is going to be able to attract those new voters. And let me tell you something. If you're a centrist Democrat who's been complaining about Trump for the last, 4 years, you think that they're going to vote for Trump over Bernie Sanders at this point? Maybe a couple of them will. Maybe Hillary Clinton will, as she expressed today. But at the end of the day, those are loyal Democrats.
Well, that's been my argument about specifically in terms of Biden's black support and Bernie's black support. I'm convinced, but I have no data. It's convinced is probably too strong of a word. But my theory is that Joe Biden's support comes from high propensity voters,
right?
Voters who, by definition, will come out and support the Democratic nominee because. Particularly, I think, black people with good reason and people of color broadly with a good reason have feel a lot of stakes involved in not having Donald Trump be president. But Sanders, my theory goes, and it's not just mine, is attracting low propensity black voters, younger voters maybe. There's
it's amazing.
Yeah, Malika Jabali was tweeting about this the other day in response to a piece about economic anxiety not being the driving force behind Trump. And I tend to agree that economic anxiety was not the primary force driving Donald Trump's election. I think whatever percentage, a high percentage of people show up and vote for the Republican Party based upon I want to get less in taxes because I'm rich, or I don't like non-white people, and I'm not too thrilled with women either.
I think they voted for many of them voted for
yes.
Obama. So,
however, she writes almost 600,000 people who went for Obama in 2012. This is in 2012 when he already had diminished numbers. Didn't vote for either Hillary or Trump.
That's right.
In 2016 in 3 swing states.
That's right.
And Trump won the White House by 107,000. I actually think it's 70,000 votes in those states. Or maybe she's talking about 3 other states. But the bottom line is that those people, there's a sliver of people out there who are gettable by this. And that is, I think, like where a lot of the confusion comes from. People sort of like overstate the implications of, or I should say, overstate the numbers when it comes to like why people voted for Trump. The vast majority of people who voted for Trump voted for Mitt Romney.
Right.
And Mitt Romney was, but this small slice that's going to make the difference in 3 or 4 swing states, which if those swing states flip by 100,000 votes, then all of a sudden Donald Trump loses by 4 million votes, 3 points. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the only story.
That's what the Democrats, when they were playing this whole Russia game, they were trying to criticize that Russian influence in meddling with our elections was, it was this vast conspiracy. Okay. If so, they were extremely sophisticated in targeting that small percentage with those ads on Facebook. It wasn't some, and I'm saying if that were true, this is the Democrats' strategy here. When the reality was the Democrats ignored their base. I was in Philadelphia on election day.
I think both had to happen, frankly.
Right. I was in Philadelphia on election day, and I went to a district, a polling site that had the highest propensity voters. And I remember going to the front in the morning and I said, how's it been looking all day? And they're like, it's really odd. Like, not that many people are showing up. We think that there's something wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? There's maybe a misinformation campaign. People were told election day was a different day. And then later, as I was going around the same neighborhood, different polling sites, they were saying the same thing over and over. And I asked, okay, so is Hillary, did they get buses? I mean, what do they do? Because people, busing people into election sites is actually not uncommon, senior citizens, whatever. And they said, oh no, they don't have an office in this neighborhood, in this district. And so this is Philadelphia, and notably Trump took outer Philadelphia. But if
this is how you win as a Democrat, you run up the votes in urban centers to get to overcome. But their whole strategy was, as articulated by them, particularly in Pennsylvania, it was like for every blue collar worker we lose in Pittsburgh, we're going to pick up 3 Republicans in the suburbs.
But this was an African American district,
right?
Almost 95%, and this is, I think, ultimately, Trump, his slice, as you just said, was the Mitt Romney vote. And there were takes on this like a year later that really dug in and said it was wealthy white men and their wives or partners, women who voted with their husbands, that swayed the election. And that's when the whole blame white women for the election, that messaging came out. But at the end of the day, if you can't get your base, these are like the easiest people to get to show up.
Well, they're not. This is the thing is like, I don't know if they're it depends on how you define base, right? Like they definitely agree with your principles. I think what the research shows is that they don't necessarily agree that you're going to do anything about it.
Right.
And so I'm just not motivated to vote. And so I think the story of that election, it depends on like what you want to look at. The entire haystack, or the last straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Like which one of those 2 things do you want to look at? And to a certain extent, the straw that is already on the camel's back is going to be there until, for generations, slowly diminish, right? Like hopefully over time, there'll be less misogyny, there'll be less racism.
Right.
But in the meantime, what you can do is make sure that last straw is not there by going out and getting those low propensity voters who are already, you don't have to persuade them of anything other than you get that you're really going to do what they want you to do.
I think ultimately what the Democrats are angry about with Bernie, other than the attacks, whatever they want to say about having a heated primary, democracy, is that and Hillary sort of reveals this. She's not being coached with her messaging very well, if she is being coached at all. She basically said, that he stood in the way of the nomination for her. And I'm thinking maybe that they just didn't start early enough. I mean, they had maybe their plan, you have a campaign plan. It went awry, and their campaign plan was to start going after Trump or start with a different messaging strategy, or start organizing different areas in like March instead of in July or whatever it was. I mean, it's just something to throw out there. I think that really is, when you pull back the curtain, the Democrats were signaling that they wanted to get started on their campaign much, much, much sooner. And Bernie stood in the way, and they were angry about that. And of course, she lost the election. So, in their minds, it's because they weren't able to expand quickly enough.
I mean, that's very possible. I mean, she also had to spend more time. I think it's a myriad of things, but nobody gets along with him. He's not liked. Let's play this clip of Bernie. And I can relate to this, I have to admit, ladies and gentlemen, because I am not good with pleasantries. It's not that I'm against it, and it's that it does not occur to me. Like, I'm always sort of like, I text people in the morning, I text them something and then they come back with good morning. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I forgot to say that. That's what you say in the morning.
But you got mad at what was his name, John, for not saying hello?
Who? Oh, yeah, John from San Antonio. Yeah, I'm learning. But there he is. But yes, but John is like that too, I think, where it's like salutations. Well, we've got business to do, ladies and gentlemen. We're not. But here's Bernie Sanders as part of the. We haven't talked about the New York Times.
So great.
We haven't talked about the New York Times failed endorsement. We'll talk about that in a moment. But here is a clip from Bernie's interview where I guess. They're asking him about, why do people refer to you as a little bit of a loner in the Senate or something to that effect?
Look, I don't tolerate bullshit terribly well. And I come from a different background than a lot of other people who run the country. I'm not good at backslapping. I'm not good at pleasantries. If you have your birthday, I'm not going to call you up to congratulate you, say you love me and you write nice things about me. That's not what I do. Never have. And I take that as a little bit of a criticism, self-criticism. I've been amazed at how many people respond to, happy birthday. Oh, Bernie, thanks so much for calling. It works. It's just not my style. I try to stay focused on the important issues facing working families in this country, and I fight for them.
Oh my God, these faces.
I mean, I'm of two minds on some level. It's like, when he says it's not my style, I think it's much deeper than that. Because I think, certainly, look, one could argue, you got to put up with the pleasantries and the bullshit to achieve what you're trying to achieve. It's very hard to achieve what you're trying to. I just think that it doesn't occur to him to do those things. He has some self-awareness of it when he's put in a position where analyze yourself for this endorsement. Okay, here it is. But, I can't tell you how many times I've gone remember, say good morning. And I forget.
Right.
It's just.
So I have a couple theories about this. First one, I just want to debunk those lying Bernie Sanders. 2 years ago, he sent me his book for my birthday with a bunch of little other things for my birthday, the birthday card. So, by the way, my birthday's on Tuesday.
Well, there you go.
Monday. Just remember that. Monday is my birthday.
Monday? I won't remember that.
I know, nobody will. So I won't remember it. I didn't. But the other thing is that, they call him a loner in the Senate. And of course, he's notably an independent and he caucuses with Democrats. But what he doesn't have to do is he doesn't have to go and raise money for Democrats. He still did it in 2016 and beyond. But I don't know if this was intentional or not. It might have been intentional for him to be an independent because it doesn't tether you to these ridiculous, fundraising standards, which really come with, there's deal making there. So when Senator Schumer says, do you want our support in your primary? Well, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And he has separated himself from the pack on that. And I think there's resentment internally with the Senate Dems and his colleagues for not having to play by those rules.
Of course, we're seeing it with AOC too,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, she's given Democrats hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the vast majority of other House members. But she's done it according to her rules.
Right.
And they resent that. And so, the idea, well, I'm going to be like what you advise Bernie do and what Bernie has basically said, which is we're going to chill. We're not going to pay attention to Hillary Clinton's promoting her documentary.
Is it actually a documentary? So that's the funniest thing of this. She actually couldn't even plug her work. I don't even know she has a documentary. I thought that was a joke.
It was reported in the Hollywood Reporter because she was up at Sundance. Well, she's at Sundance, I guess, for her documentary. Or she's like in the
Is Obama producing it? No, seriously, he's a producer.
I know.
Real question.
I know. It makes me too sad to even contemplate any of what you're talking about.
What happens in 10 years when all these people, maybe not Obama, but most likely...
When some of the streaming services contract, what are they going to do?
No, when all these old politicians have retired or moved on to other lives.
I mean, this is like, this is my argument about generational. Like once this generation, basically steps off the stage.
Right.
It's wide open. I mean, there's so much running room ahead of someone like AOC.
Right.
There's just not much, that's why, like her taking out Crowley basically set the Democratic leadership in the House back by generations because there was nobody there.
Right. And Booker and Kamala Harris and who else Pete Buttigieg is a different category, but this Gen X group, I guess I guess they're both baby boomers.
They're probably, they're Gen X.
Older Gen X?
Yeah, I'm on the outer side of Gen X, and I don't think either one of them is older than me.
No.
Oof, it's terrifying.
They are. I think he's 50.
Like I say.
Oh, wait, are you 50?
I'm older than 50. Yeah.
You look so good, Sam.
Thank you. That's
wow.
Very sweet. But Cory Booker is, Booker's a couple years younger than me.
Wow.
So he is Gen X. I am on the outside of Gen X. I'm just I think I got in by a year or two.
That's amazing.
So
I didn't know.
Oh yeah, no.
So when you grow a beard, do you age like 10 years?
I just aged 10 years. That's all I do. All right. Speaking of AOC, here she is. I guess she was interviewed by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't know what was the context for this.
This was like an MLK speakers panel.
And she is talking about, and none of this should be controversial, right? Mm-hmm. It's very weird that there's any controversy about this because it's something that everyone will tell you. Like nothing she's saying is profound or in this one clip is like dangerous.
I mean, it's dangerous because they label it dangerous.
It's because she is a congresswoman.
Right.
It's because she's supposed to be on the inside. You're not supposed to tell about this. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm.
In what you said earlier, too, I wanted to go back to what you said about our left party. We don't have a left party in the United States. The Democratic Party is not a left party. The Democratic Party is a center or center conservative party. We do not advocate we can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. Not even a floor vote that gets voted down. We can't even get a vote on it. So this is not a left party. There are left members inside the Democratic Party that are working to try to make that shift happen. But you're right, it does convey a certain sentiment about true believers. And there are a lot of true believers that we can capitalism our way out of poverty in the Democratic Party. If anything, that's probably the majority.
Right.
And that's an area in which I agree with Dr. King, that assessment is flawed.
So well said.
It's so well said. It's just, when she's not supposed to say that, which is also sort of stupid too, because even if you have Nancy Pelosi's agenda, to appease to the most conservative members of the Democratic Party. Like, that's what you want her saying.
Right.
You don't want her saying, like, you want her saying,
Right.
like, the Democratic Party is not a left party. Like, that's the thing that I just don't even get.
I don't either. And it's interesting because these types of arguments don't make it onto the mainstream media, and you're kind of shifted off the stage if you start to do that, as I'm sure many of us have. Sam, I'm sure you've notably experienced that. But you hear the consulting class reinforcing that. And so this is a much bigger issue than just the House and just being a loyal Democrat in following Nancy Pelosi's, orders. It's really something that has gone, and bringing it into the New York Times endorsement, it's a groupthink in which you don't have to be messaged that. You just have to sort of intrinsically believe that. I remember 4 years ago, I said something about the Democratic Party wasting all its money on consultants, and I got threatening text messages from DNC members being like, how dare you say that? When every single DNC member had a copy and knows this, but it was the fact that I aired it on CNN and I challenged the funding structure, and they somehow thought that was going to enable Republicans to beat us. And that's sort of the old trick. You can't attack your own because then the Republicans are going to use it against you. And I think that is why they're mad at Bernie for saying corruption or not saying corruption or whatever the story is, and for challenging Hillary, because you're now, in their minds, a tool of the Republicans. I just don't think that they'll say that publicly about AOC because she has way too much power at this point.
And I don't know if they actually believe that. I mean, I think some of them do.
Yeah.
I think some of them do and some of them don't.
Right.
Some of them just like, it's cynical. I'm going to use this. It's effective.
Of course.
And then others, I think, actually genuinely do believe this. You're enabling Donald Trump by saying that Joe Biden is corrupt. But the fact of the matter is that we still have an opportunity as a party, but it's really, look, it's just a bunch of individuals who all decided to vote in one, in one primary or another, to look at Joe Biden and assess, how dangerous is he of a bet to go into the general election? I mean, I have obviously sort of ideological issues with Joe Biden. But even that aside, he scares me a little bit. The idea that he would go into that election, like, same game plan.
Right.
I'm going to run on my CV, and I'm going to run as a guy I'm the guy who's going to restore us back to where it was. And Trump's going to go, that's why I ran in the first place.
Exactly.
Because of the swamp.
Exactly.
That's why I won the first time, because of the swamp. And nobody is going to vote. Trump's never going to convince anybody to vote for him that would be inclined to vote for Joe Biden.
Exactly.
But Trump can convince people that, like, it's just not worth it for me to vote, to go out and vote for Joe Biden because he's not going to deliver what he says he's going to deliver. That's the trick, right? Is you just depress those voters.
That's right.
One other thing that's fascinating to me, the criticism that we're hearing of Bernie Sanders is not, like, if you look at the criticism of the way that goes around of Biden, of Warren, nobody's really spent any time criticizing Klobuchar or Buttigieg. These are all critiques that we will see in the general.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them.
That's right.
Right? Every single one of them. The critiques that we're told that we're going to hear about Sanders. He's a socialist.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to give you everything for free. He's going to tax the hell out of you. We're not hearing those in the Democratic committee. Like what? Like we're hearing stuff like he's an outsider, right? I mean, that's what he's saying. Like nobody likes him. He's an outsider. Really?
He's not one of us.
He's not one of us. He could run on that in the general.
Totally.
like he could.
He is running on that now, though. So there might be some power utility in Hillary Clinton saying he's not a loyal Democrat. He's just, I don't know why he can't be a Democrat, but says Madam former Republican. It's ludicrous, but it's also what he's saying, in the election against the media elite. That I didn't want the New York Times endorsement. I basically walked in there, insulted them to their
he did.
He insulted them to their faces, and you could see it in their faces. Yep. Can I just share a little anecdote, personal story? Because I tweeted about this and it's gotten a little bit of attention. when I went in for my New York Times endorsement meeting last year, almost a year ago at this point, they called me for the endorsement meeting. I showed up. I'm in the lobby. I'm going to check in. I have my press people with me. It's like a whole thing. You prepare. I had a former deputy editor of the New York Times help prepare me for this meeting. We anticipated everything. Okay. I'm in the lobby and Margay, who's in the pictures, calls me up. She's very nice. Says, I'm so sorry, we have to cancel. The Amazon story has just broken. I'm the only person who from the beginning was against Amazon, who was organizing in Queens. It was literally in my neighborhood where the Amazon headquarters was going to show up, within a mile of my house. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'm happy to comment on that if you would like me to. No, we're going to have to reschedule. So we reschedule. I think it's like a week later. I show up. 2 people are in the room for the editorial meeting. That's not normal. And so they canceled on me in the lobby the first time, went in the second time, and they were so condescending of the left in that room. And they tried to throw me, we recorded, the meeting, throw a bunch of gotcha questions at me. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I answered all the gotcha questions because I was prepared. They did not even mention me in the New York Times endorsement article. Yet they endorsed my opponent who won. That makes a big difference in New York City politics because, readers tend to be the most high propensity voters. But I know that I answered those questions. They were hard. I know for a fact they were harder than my opponent's questions because I read about them in the paper. Silly questions were thrown at them. And I saw this interview and it was like PTSD, except he had the whole editorial board. They were asking questions like, who broke your heart, Cory Booker? Who's broken your heart in the past? What? You're going to be the leader of the free world, and I want to know who broke your heart.
Who broke his heart? Who
broke his heart? I mean, Newark broke his heart. That's what he said. But this is what you're getting, and I'm disgusted by this entire process, and I think so many other people are disgusted.
The 2 endorsements was the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. Honestly, when I read that, I thought someone was joking.
Yeah.
Like when I first, the first tweet or whatever, maybe someone texted me. I think someone texted me and said, the Times endorsed Warren and Klobuchar. And I just was like, LOL. I thought it was a joke.
Right. Well, also,
how do you say?
They're 2 women, very different women. What is your definition of feminism if that's your definition?
Well, I think their argument was, if you want somebody who's not going to do anything that's too ambitious, go with Klobuchar. She's the best candidate for that. If you want somebody who's going to do a lot of stuff that's ambitious, go with Warren. She's the best candidate for that. But the whole point of an endorsement is not like we pick the 2 people that we like the best, or even as narrow as the 2 most competent. It really should be about a political program. And they set it up as if these are diametrically opposed political programs. Let's just say, okay, I'll stipulate they are. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but for the sake of the argument, they are. Does that mean if there was a third programmatic choice, like full-on authoritarianism?
Right.
We chose 3 people in this endorsement. 1 if you want some radical change, 1 if you don't want much change, and 1 if you want a complete authoritarian dictatorial control. This person's the most competent person to do it. Like, how could they actually do that?
Not to mention, they've been talking about paths to victory for the last 4 years, and yet in my opinion, neither of these have a path to victory.
I did not expect that the Times would, endorse the candidate that I would want them to endorse. That doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is how inept they are as even protecting their own brand in refusing to make a choice. And this is the opinion section. It's not they're not reporting on this. No. This is the opinion section. The idea that they're going to go out there and they're so cowardly that they cannot make an assessment editorially as opinion writers as to should we have, in their minds, radical change or not radical change? That's a pretty, that's 180 degrees of what's on the menu, short of this sort of, or eco-fascism. We got the best, the most confident eco-fascist. We've got the middle of the road, and then we've got the left, radical.
The Mitt Romney of eco-fascism.
It's just, I don't know.
And the craziest part is Bernie didn't even make the top 4.
Of course not.
No, I mean, if you want to entertain democracy, if you want to air this as a TV show for, I don't know why they even did that. Like, it's not ratings for them. I don't understand their business model at this point. It's clearly not us, and so they just don't care. But they didn't even entertain him. That's crazy town. He was winning in the polls as he walked in the room.
That doesn't surprise me at all. That does not.
One of the higher ups said they're a capitalist newspaper, like 3 or 4 years ago. So
they're owned by an oligarch family.
Right.
Let's not forget these papers are not, they may have Pulitzers, but they're owned by oligarchs. And who's fighting oligarchs?
But how perfect though that their only response to a candidate that they perceive as an existential threat, all they can come up with is like, well, there's 2 choices. We're going to split the vote for the people who listen to us. Honestly, if I was in the Sanders campaign, I would be sitting around going like, well, this is going to sound stupid, guys, but is there any way we could convince them to endorse 2 people? Because that would
dilute the impact.
That would dilute the impact completely of what they're doing, and it would be all scrambled. Like, neither one of these 2, Warren or Klobuchar could not come away by saying like, I got the endorsement because somebody else was like,
they tried.
Me too.
Oh, the Warren campaign.
Of course.
They literally, their messaging online was crazy town. They're as much as we think this might be some sort of sophisticated strategy, just look at what their consultants are saying on Twitter. They're having meltdowns. They're just spending their entire time on Twitter attacking Bernie. I mean, these are people who are on her team and senior and her surrogates in meltdown mode, as if, and I think part of it maybe Klobuchar might pull a few voters from Warren in Iowa. So I'm not sure how that's going to line up at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the poll in New Hampshire and then just the national poll, what happened the other day with Warren and Bernie, it hurt her. I mean, there's no other way to make that assessment. It hurt her. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, in my mind, really matter which version you believe. You can believe that Bernie Sanders said this in a meeting with her in 2018. You don't know why he said that. If he said I think it's 2020 is not the year that a woman could win. He could have said that. He could have meant it's not the year that you can win, because remember, this is in 2018. We're still sort of like in the wake of the DNA stuff.
Right.
And maybe, but I'm just taking I'm taking the most favorable light to Warren. I have a feeling that she probably believes he said that. It's possible that she didn't. I also believe that it was probably a leak that they didn't necessarily plan. She spoke to some reporters. I have a feeling that the reporters double-dealed. The off the record, they told other reporters. Then somebody said, well, I'm going to do a story on this. Well, can I get you on the record? And they said no, but then eventually they said yes. Even if I stipulate all that, it indicates to me a failure of their political team to understand what's going to be helpful and what's not going to be helpful.
Absolutely.
Because they had 8 hours to sit down, fashion that statement, to game it out. It would have taken 90 minutes to come to the conclusion, the best thing for us to do. And to a certain extent, Bernie did that with this apology with Biden, is we let the story hang out there. We get all the benefit from it. Then we get the benefit of coming out and saying, I would never talk about what I said in private with Bernie Sanders, because I'm not that kind of, I'm not that kind of person. You can just play some type of I've got too much integrity to talk about what was said in a private meeting with an ally. Period. End of story. Don't ask me any more questions. I'm not going to answer it. Not going to answer it at all. These are scurrilous rumors, and I'm not going to answer it. I don't talk about what happens in a private meeting. Boom. And then everybody's like, she's got a lot of integrity. But Bernie, well, how can you say that? You get both of those things. The politics of it seem to me to be fairly straightforward.
You always want the candidate to look above all the chaos. And she didn't. She got in there. It was like mud wrestling.
Exactly.
The worst. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it was such a minor league gamble in my opinion. I felt like this is something that would come out of like a local congressional race, that kind of last minute trick, because whether, as you said, whether it happened or didn't happen, you threw it out there in the last minute.
Right. I don't, like I say, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt that they didn't have control of it getting out there in that way, but they had the statement, and her statement should have been like, I don't care about the damn emails. That's what her statement should have been. You know, similarly, like that. Here is Pete Buttigieg.
Oh, goodness.
Speaking of campaign craft, Nomi, you've worked on campaigns before.
I have.
What kind of failure leads you to enter into a room of supporters in New Hampshire, right? Yeah, now, like you have advanced men, this and that. Your advanced man is like, all right, don't worry, Pete. We got 6 American flags on stage. You're going to walk up there. The seal of New Hampshire is going to be up there. You're going to look like president.
I'm sorry, just as a side note, is that ship sinking in the New Hampshire seal?
It does look like it's capsized.
It's the flag.
That's sort of, I think that may have been a little bit telling. So Pete Buttigieg walks onto this stage, and apparently it turns out everyone in the audience is a protester.
This is amazing.
Thanks for coming. We want the same things. I can't make out your song, but we definitely want the same things. Now,
You can't make out the song. Well, I got a clue for you. I can't make it out either, but I can read. And like every single sign that's there says 2020, Pete takes money from fossil fuel. So I'm going to guess this is the Sunrise Movement people. And they came in, and I mean, to me, it suggests that there's some type of breakdown on the campaign.
I think so. And, you know, maybe it's fundraising. I mean, he has a lot of money, but who knows how much he's spending it. I don't know how much cash was on hand in the last filing. But I think right now the game is you want him to hit below 15%, as John said.
Yep.
Because covering him, I covered the DNC chairs race in 2017. And, you know, it's hilarious because in 2017, people were like, why is this guy running for DNC chair? And he's running for president now. But it's the same playbook. He wanted to be able to be a kingmaker in the end. At the end of the day, I think he had three people supporting him. So it was a smoke and mirrors kind of campaign. But he put all of his support behind Tom Perez. And, you know, I could see him working the room and how he did it back then. But the truth is that if he doesn't hit 15%, you know, he doesn't have much of a path to victory or much to barter on. But the question is, where does that support go? Does it go to Biden? Does it go to Warren? That is a real issue.
Right. And how much control does he have of that support? Right.
So do you want him in the race or don't you want him in the race? And this is, I think, the sophisticated strategy that hopefully Bernie's team is.
What do you think? What I mean, if you do you want him in the race?
I think yes, because
the idea is it's pulling from Warren
and Biden. Yeah, until probably as far along as possible, Super Tuesday, and then he has to bow out. I mean, once it's clear that Bernie's, you know, locked it down. If he wins the first 3 or first 2, and then Nevada, and, you know, loses South Carolina or whatever, and comes in winning California, it's going to be, even if the delegate count is more or less close, it's just...
There's going to be pressure on Buttigieg from party elders to step aside so that we can stop Bernie.
Now, keep in mind, if Biden or Warren, but I'll say Biden for the sake of this exercise, is not pulling in big numbers from California or Texas or any of these big states, but it's smaller states, or he's second choice in many states, and the delegate count, almost like Hillary and Bernie, on the flip side, I would love to see how the DNC frames that, because, you know, they kept trying to say to Bernie, well, it's the math. It's the math. It's the math. Get out of the race. It's the math. Of course, they were counting super delegates that whole time, and they were neck and neck when it came to actual delegates. I'm very curious how the DNC is going to frame it this time around. Are they going to start saying we're going into brokered convention in March after Super Tuesday?
Well, I guess we'll see. You know what? We need to... We're going to have to punt until not next week. Maybe sometime next week and come in. We'll have this conversation about whether rigged or not rigged, I guess.
It's all about process.
Let's talk about that. Here is what should we play here? I want to play one or two more clips. We were talking about the idea of this equivalence between Trump and Bernie. Here is another, and I started off the show by saying this is why you do not. It's fun. It's gratifying to see someone who realized, like, oh, I was working for Breitbart. What a horrible human being. What a horrible outfit. What a horrible institution. The conservative movement is horrible. That does not then make them like representative of what your average Democrat wants out of being like, if you've been a Breitbartian, if you've been a Republican, that just means that that just means that you've had a propensity to have a certain set of issues, and then you have a propensity to get even more wretched. Once you like slice off that wretched part, we still have a problem. And that is that fundamentally Republicans believe in different things than normal people, which is like, you shouldn't be left on to your own when it comes to healthcare. And if you die on the streets, that's just because you made some poor life decisions, like being born to the wrong parents, maybe, or you should have taken that job, or maybe you should have gone for a different major in college or something.
She got into more student loan debt.
Exactly. Or you know what? You had that opportunity from your uncle that one time to be an apprentice as an electrician. You said no, so you're going to die of cancer because you're not going to have health insurance.
You could have gotten on a boat and migrated on a different month.
Exactly. But so here is former Breitbartian Kurt Bardella saying that he's noticed that the vast majority of Bernie Sanders supporters have two legs. And oddly enough, so don't the vast majority of Trump supporters.
Well, the Bernie Bros first came along in the 2016 campaign, and they seem to be the vocal, kind of almost mob-like, die-hard, cult-like following of Bernie Sanders. Now, I should be clear, Bernie Sanders has throughout the campaign in 2016, decried some of the tactics they used on social media, the bullying and the targeting primarily of people of color, women who disagree with Senator Sanders' platform. But one of the things that I've experienced firsthand is when I've come on this very program and have raised valid concerns about Senator Sanders and his viability, immediately the Twitter sphere, the Bernie Bros, go hardcore attack mode. And the traits and the words and the rhetoric that they use, the only thing I've ever seen close to that is what MAGA people do, what the Trump voters do. And I think that is a very dangerous and disturbing trend to see, particularly when Democrats are trying to show that there is a better way than what we've seen from Trump, better than the divisiveness and the use of fear and hatred and extremism to try to scare people into a particular ideology. We have to be a Democratic Party that's okay with honest disagreements, that's okay with raising valid concerns and valid questions. I would like to think that Senator Sanders himself wants that for the Democratic Party, but some of his most ardent and hardcore supporters are taking some very, I think, dangerous rhetorical measures. And I think that Senator Sanders in the long run is going to need to be a little bit more vocal about calling that out and condemning that.
All right. So here's the thing. Is it really honest disagreement about ideas if you are basically equating, like we just saw what happened in Virginia on MLK Day, right? And the FBI scooped up about a half a dozen people who had active plans, supposedly, to commit acts of violence on Martin Luther King's birthday. In Virginia, the President of the United States tweeted out in support of these people coming with these weapons. When you say it's rhetorically dangerous to criticize me because I came on this TV show and you equate this, you are not being honest and open and having an honest disagreement. You are you want to say Twitter's a cesspool, and for candidates that have diehard supporters, Twitter's horrible? Absolutely right.
Right.
But
at least we don't pay ours to make these comments.
Well, but it's like, yeah, exactly. But it's like, you know, it's like Alan Dershowitz saying like, God, man, I can't go on the Vineyard without people saying like, I'm not going to have drinks with you anymore. Right. Like, what are you like? How are you extrapolating, and how do they allow this? I mean, it's absurd. This is why you cannot platform people like this.
Well, the funniest thing is these are the same people who go on Fox News and criticize Donald Trump and are Democrats on Fox News, as I am often on Fox News, or they're Republicans criticizing Donald Trump. Let me tell you, you have not seen hatred until you have gone on a primetime show, as I'm sure you have too. Well, maybe not, you're at MSNBC. On Fox News, you have not seen the level of hatred. And with all that being said, you get used to it and you shrug it off. And sometimes it can be dangerous and you report it. And I've been in those situations before. But they have never, ever experienced that type of hate. And one more note, because I really want to bring this up. In 2017 and 18, when we were on the Unity Reform Commission, they rebooted their Brockbot, you know, the David Brock $1 million trolls, whatever it was. And they have this ecosystem, which I'll talk about on my show. Subscribe at Patreon/The Nomiki Show. They have this messaging apparatus that is organized many different ways. You have like bat signal people like Neera Tanden out there who signal to Joy Reid, who signal to, you know, the MSNBC host, whatever, on Twitter. And then you have like notables on Twitter who reinforce it. And then you have the followers that go on to Reddit and organize. I received a death threat for the Unity Reform Commission, in which nobody was watching because it was on C-SPAN once, I think. Nobody knew anything about the commission other than what we would share, and TYT would show up. I received a death threat with a set of flowers in Vegas, and I had to call up Jamie Harrison at the DNC and I told him, it's got to stop. I was getting hundreds and hundreds of nasty tweets, as was Jim Zogby.
Somebody sent you flowers with a death threat?
And then it stopped. It literally stopped. Jamie Harrison, I don't know what he did, but it stopped. So with all of their outrageous accusations against the Bernie bros, or whatever you want to call us,
I just find it hard to believe that there are like really like people that intense that, well, it's inevitable. It's
the internet, and we have that many people.
If you're on a Unity Commission talking about the rules of the DNC and the primary, it's inevitable there's going to be a lot of crazies out there.
It was the craziest thing.
That's messed up.
And it was all because they had this smear saying that we were trying to replace all primaries with caucuses because we hated people of color, which was fabricated entirely. And Armando from Daily Kos pushed that out there with some other people, when that wasn't even, you can't even legally do that. It's like by your state. Of course, you know, this was their messaging. They wanted to kill the reforms.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to have to catch up and talk about how much of those reforms. Folks, I'm sorry. I thought we would get the phones today. Tomorrow,
my fault.
We just have a news day tomorrow, so we'll have plenty of time. We'll also, tomorrow, we should be hearing more about this big James O'Keefe bomb that he's dropping. I'm pretty excited to hear about that. We'll get into this tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, see you. And Nomiki. Nomiki. Real pleasure.
So much fun.
See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive